Tomoe Gozen, first sword. In the previous episode, an 8-year-old girl shocked an entire society by demonstrating sword techniques that rivaled adult samurai. Now, at 10, Tomoe Gozen is about to discover that admiring war from afar is very different from feeling blood on her hands. It was the 3rd month of the 2nd year of Oho, 1162 by the Western calendars, when Tomoe Gozen killed his first man. She was 12 years old. And that would change not only his life, but the fate of a war that hadn't even begun yet. The Relentless Master. 6 months had passed since Nakahara Kanito discovered Tomoe's secret and personally took charge of her training. 6 months of physical and mental torture that had transformed a talented girl into a budding war machine. Kanito hadn't lied about the intensity. If her previous training with Kenhira had been rigorous, what she faced now bordered on the inhumane. Before dawn, a 5-kilometer run carrying rocks. Morning, 1,000 repeated sword cuts until her arms trembled with exhaustion. Afternoon, actual combat against multiple opponents. Evening, meditation and study of military tactics. Pain is just weakness leaving the body, Kanito repeated as she struggled to stand after training sessions that would have left adult samurai unconscious. And you have a lot of weakness to work off. But Tomoe never complained, never asked for mercy. Never showed the slightest intention of giving up. With each passing day, his technique became more refined, his speed increased, his endurance grew. Most importantly, his mind adapted to the brutal reality of violence. A sword is just a tool, Kanito explained during the martial philosophy sessions that followed physical training, but the mind that guides that tool determines whether you live or die in combat, and weak minds die quickly. It was during these lessons that Tomoe demonstrated the most disturbing aspect of her talent. She didn't just understand the techniques, she instinctively improved them. She absorbed complex tactical concepts and applied them in ways that impressed even Kanito, a veteran of dozens of battles. If an opponent is stronger, use their strength against them, she said during a discussion on asymmetric combat. If they're faster, force them to fight at your pace. If they're more experienced, make them underestimate your inexperience until it's too late. Words from a 12-year-old child who spoke of life and death as if they were moves in a game of Go. You understand, Kanito said that night, that eventually you'll have to kill someone. Not in training, not in exercise, but for real. Real blood, real death. Are you ready for that? Tomoe stared at him with eyes that seemed older than her 12 years. Master, I was born prepared. It was an answer that chilled him to the bone, because he believed it, and she was about to prove she wasn't just talking. Shadows on the mountain. The threat came from the northern mountains, like wolves descending on unprotected sheep. A band of 40 desperate ronin led by a man known only as Kuro, the Black, because his soul was as dark as his clothes. They were masterless soldiers, disgraced samurai who had chosen banditry over honorable seppuku. The kind of men Japanese society produced in abundance during periods of political instability, but preferred not to acknowledge their existence. They attacked 3 properties in the last week, reported the messenger, who galloped into the Nakahara compound one October afternoon. They killed all the men, took all the young women, burned everything else. No survivors. Nakahara Kanehira, the family head, listened to the report with a grim expression. His men were competent, but only 15 samurai defended an estate that spanned square kilometers. Against 40 desperate ronin, their chances were uncertain at best. What is your recommendation? Kanehira asked Kanito. Consolidate defenses at the main compound. Bring all families from the outer holdings. Send messengers requesting reinforcements from the allied clans. Kaneto's answer was practical, conservative, sensible. And pray they arrive before the bandits. That's when Tomoe spoke. Or we could hunt them down first. The silence that followed was broken only by the flickering of lanterns. A 12-year-old girl had just suggested they take the offensive against a band of 40 seasoned killers. Tomoe, Kanehira said in a controlled voice, That's adult talk." "Then maybe they should listen to someone thinking like an adult," she replied, moving closer to the map. "They attacked here, here, and here." Her small fingers marked the locations precisely. "The pattern suggests they'll come from the northeast, probably at the next new moon to maximize surprise. That gives us 4 days." Kanito watched his pupil with an indescribable expression. In months of training, he had taught her combat techniques, not military strategy, but she had absorbed tactical concepts like a sponge absorbs water. "Go on," he said. "They expect a passive defense. Why not give them an active ambush?" His eyes gleamed with intellectual excitement. "Small, mobile group, strike where they don't expect it. Force them to fight on terrain of our choosing, separated, confused." "And who would lead this small group?" Kanehira asked with barely concealed skepticism. Tomoe's response was a smile that promised violence. "Someone they'll never see coming." It was madness. It was impossible. It was suicide. And everyone in the room knew it could work. Ambush. The October new moon brought absolute darkness to the Shinano Mountains. It was the kind of night where shadows seemed to have substance of their own, and every sound could mean sudden death. Tomoe was where she had predicted she would be, hidden among the rocks of Karasu Gorge, a narrow passage that any attacking force would have to traverse to reach the Nakahara estate. Beside her, 5 of the family's finest warriors waited in absolute silence. The plan was simple in conception, lethal in execution. When the bandits entered the gorge, she would attack the leader while the others created chaos in the ranks. In the resulting confusion, a seemingly inferior force could inflict disproportionate damage before retreating to the next prepared position. It was refined guerrilla tactics, the kind of strategy experienced generals took years to master, and it had been conceived by a 12-year-old girl. "Remember," she whispered to the men 3 times her age, "we strike fast, do maximum damage, retreat before they organize. We are not heroes. We are ghosts." He was a natural authority in a still childish voice, commanding respect from veteran warriors through sheer demonstrated competence. The sound came first. 40 pairs of feet walking in loose formation, the metallic clang of weapons and armor, the low conversations of men confident that surprise was on their side. Kuro had led dozens of successful raids. There was no reason to expect this one to be any different. As the vanguard entered the pass, Tomoe could see Kuro himself, a tall, thin man whose reputation for cruelty was legendary in the mountains. Scars covered his face like maps of past violence, and his eyes shone with anticipation of future violence. It was time. Tomoe took a deep breath, feeling every muscle fiber prepare for explosive movement, every martial instinct awakening to deadly reality. And then she moved. The first thing Kuro knew about the ambush was a searing pain in his left thigh as Tomoe's katana sliced through his armor like paper. It was a surgical cut, meant to incapacitate, not kill, at least not immediately. "Ambush!" he shouted, but the shout was lost in the chaos that had already exploded around him. Tomoe's 5 samurai emerged from the rocks like avenging demons, their blades finding their mark, before most of the bandits realized they were under attack. In the confined space of the gorge, superior numbers became a disadvantage. Men stumbled over each other trying to draw swords in the cramped space. But Kuro hadn't survived decades of banditry as easy prey. Ignoring the pain in his leg, he drew his own sword, a long, heavy blade stained with the blood of countless victims. "A girl," he growled, finally recognizing his attacker. "They send a girl to kill me." "No," Tomoe replied, circling him like a predator sizing up prey. "They sent a warrior." The ensuing duel lasted less than 2 minutes, but every second was etched in the memory of all who survived to witness it, and when it was over, everyone knew they had witnessed the birth of a legend. Baptism of blood. Kuro struck first, his heavy blade slicing through the air in a diagonal that would have split Tomoe in half if it had connected. But she was no longer where the blade had passed. She had moved a millimeter to the side, just enough to avoid instant death. It was the kind of precision that came from years of training against multiple opponents, from developing instincts that operated faster than conscious thought. Every hour of physical torture under Kaneto's guidance had been preparation for this moment. Impossible, Kuro muttered, regaining her balance after the failed attack. A 12-year-old girl had just avoided a blow that had killed seasoned samurai. Tomoe didn't respond. Words were a waste of energy in lethal combat. Instead, he counterattacked with a sequence that combined speed, precision, and calculated brutality. His first cut opened a red line along Kuro's right forearm, shallow but painful enough to affect his grip. The second sliced through his side guard, finding flesh between the plates of his makeshift armor. The third found his throat. Kuro fell to his knees, his hands flying to the mortal wound, blood seeping between his fingers like liquid life escaping. His eyes met Tomoe's, the eyes of a seasoned assassin confronting the eyes of a child newly become one. "How?" he whispered, his voice a wet gurgle. "Training," Tomoe replied simply, wiping his blade on the dying man's clothes. "And you underestimated who you were facing." Those were his last words. Kuro collapsed face first to the earth, his life draining away into a slowly expanding pool of darkness. Around them, the battle was already over. The death of their leader and the sudden fury of the ambushing samurai had completely broken the bandits' morale. Those who could fled to the mountains like shadows scattered by the wind, those who couldn't lay motionless on the blood-stained earth. "First kill?" asked Kaneto, who had arrived with reinforcements only to find the battle already over. Tomoe looked at the body at his feet, then at the hands that had taken life and returned death. He waited to feel something. Remorse, nausea, horror, satisfaction, anything. Instead, he felt only emptiness. As if he had completed a necessary task, nothing more. "Yes," she said, "but not the last." It was a statement made with the voice of a child, but the authority of a veteran warrior. And everyone present knew she was right. The girl who had shocked a society by becoming a warrior was dead. In her place had been born something far more dangerous, a woman who understood that violence was just another form of art. The transformation. In the weeks following Karasu's ambush, subtle but profound changes manifested in Tomoe. She still trained with the same fierce intensity, still studied military tactics with academic obsession, still demonstrated the same supernatural technique with any weapon she touched. But there was something different in his eyes. A quality that hadn't been there before. The calm recognition of someone who had crossed a fundamental line in human experience and discovered that the other side wasn't as different as they'd expected. "She's not a child anymore," Kanehira remarked to Kaneto during one of their private discussions about Tomoe's future. "Children are disturbed by violence. She accepts it as a natural reality." "That makes her dangerous," Kaneto replied, "but it also makes her valuable." It was an important distinction. In the coming world, a world of impending civil war where old alliances would dissolve and new loyalties would be forged in blood, warriors like Tomoe would be precious resources. "What will be your next step with her?" Kanehira asked. Kaneto considered the question for a long moment. "She's mastered the fundamentals. Now she must learn to lead men in battle, to think strategically on a grand scale, to navigate the political complexities that determine when to fight and when to retreat. And who can teach this?" The answer came with a smile that mixed pride and concern. Minamoto no Yoshinaka. It was a name that carried weight. Yoshinaka was Kanehira's cousin, a young commander whose reputation grew with each victory against the Taira forces. More importantly, he was a man whose political ambition could use exactly the kind of weapon Tomoe was becoming. "Is she ready?" Kanehira asked. Kaneto looked out the window, where Tomoe continued his solitary practice, each movement a promise of controlled violence. "The question isn't whether she's ready," he said. "The question is whether the world is ready for her." It was a question that would soon be answered in the most dramatic way possible. In the next episode of Tomoe Gozen, Minamoto no Yoshinaka's arrival at the Nakahara estate, marks the beginning of an alliance that will change the course of the Genpei War. But when Tomoe demonstrates her skills to the young commander, she begins a relationship that will be both her greatest strength and her eventual undoing.